April the 2nd, Liberation Day. Well, today is Liberation Day in the US, apparently. This is the historic day for the US when all their industry will come flooding back, jobs will become well paid, cheap imported goods will be a thing of the past, and Michael Jackson will be back with another #1 record. Yep, sadly, this is the distortion of populism, a kind of self-destructing madness that tries to do everything all at once without concern for the consequences. However, as with all populism, there is a very real root cause. America has mirrored the collective West over the past 2 decades. Or is it the other way round? Hollowed out shopping centres, deteriorating public services, crumbling industry and mass migration have all led to a largely disgruntled public. "We're just not what we were," seems to be the phrase that captivates the sense of gloom. Enter the politicians, who offer a radical solution which then scrambles markets. Does anyone remember that Truss budget? I never felt that her ideas were actually wrong. It was the speed of change and terrible communication that added to an already shaky bond market collapse. Today, we're witnessing an almost identical Truss moment with the Trump tariffs. The expected tax on imports into the US has sent shockwaves throughout the global stock market. Now, I listened to an interesting extract from a podcast yesterday that starred one Donald Trump before he returned as president. And during that interview, he advocated the beautiful decisions of President William McKinley at the end of the 19th century. President McKinley used punitive taxes or tariffs on imported goods to the US to help the US labour market. I think Mr. Trump sees himself as following in the McKinley blueprint. Mr. McKinley was later assassinated. Let's not dwell on that point. Where I believe Mr. Trump is wrong is that the US of the late 1800s was not part of a globalized open market in the same way that it has been over the past century. Therefore, Mr. McKinley's policies had a lot less to lose. The United States today is a massive global player that has become reliant upon imported goods, just like the rest of the collective West. I can see no way that taxing these goods will not lead to inflation. And really, this is still the big worry for the global economy. Actually, inflation has become a whole lot more scary in the past 12 months, also because of its relative stagflation. Now, stagflation is a term used to describe an economy that is failing to grow, but where inflation continues, usually due to external influences beyond the local economy's control. However, some inflation with healthy underlying economic growth is actually quite desirable. If inflation is a central banker's bad dream, stagflation is their nightmare. I recall the credit crunch of 2008, when we could see the economy grinding to a halt, whilst inflation still rose due to the China building boom. Central banks like to think in straight lines. If inflation is rising, we raise interest rates. If the economy is stalling, we cut interest rates. But what if they're both happening at the same time? This is the unbelievable risk that the Trump administration are now taking, just as we are heading into a nasty period of global stagflation, probably leaving the Federal Reserve, the Fed, with their heads in their hands. But there is some good news in all of this. Faced with a choice between future inflation and an angry Donald, the Fed could well find themselves backed into a rate-cutting corner. They've actually intimated that they may need to make some rate cuts starting from June. The Bank of England seems to be completely in step with the Fed these days, and so they may also start cutting rates. Rate cuts are really what our client portfolios need to see. Now, in the case of our mainstream portfolios, our clients will hold some oil and armaments, which has helped to keep some air in the tyres. However, in the case of our ethical portfolios, the complete lack of war stocks, for whatever word it would call them, is temporarily hurting them. As an ethical investor myself, I'm not about to rush into fossil fuels, guns and tobacco, as this would defeat the object for me personally. However, clearly I want to still find pockets of growth. Now, rate cuts could really change the situation quickly, as investors tend to favour growth stocks and bonds when rates are falling. These sectors make up a good chunk of modern diversified portfolios today for investors. Now, we know that oil, gold and armament stocks would have been the best place to have had all your money for the past 12 months. However, this is with the benefit of hindsight. And the fact is that we just don't know what will happen next. And this is why we have to sensibly diversify our clients' funds. I remember gold enjoying a similar run during and after the credit crunch, until it suddenly didn't. During a very short time in 2013, gold fell by a nauseating 30%, plunging down at a terrifying rate of knots. But here's the kicker. It took over a decade for investors to see gold return to its 2011 price. So, in summary, I think that Trump's tariffs will cause some more market mayhem for a while. We just have to sit tight and ride this one out. However, I do expect the risks of recession and fears of stagflation to pressure central banks into cutting rates. This should be very good news for our clients' portfolios when it comes. My clear message is that the funds our clients are invested in haven't suddenly become bad funds. The potential for a rebound is real, and I'm so excited for when it will happen. Perseverance will be rewarded. As a footnote to those in despair over the White House pantomime, it is well worth perhaps reading some of the US commentary on Trump. Large sections of the American public are already very concerned, and they might not be so forgiving if Uncle Donald crashes their pension funds whilst hurting their living standards. Time will tell. As ever, we're here for you 100% if you need anything at all. Please don't suffer in silence. My very best wishes.